Hey everyone, welcome back to The Field. We are your hosts, John and
Michelle.
Alright, awesome. Listen, thank you guys for coming on out back again to our space. This is pretty much a space, if you're joining us for the first time, this is a space for us to have deeper conversations. If you've been following the channel for a while, thank you so much for your support. We have some conversations around just real life issues, real life topics, right? And how do we sort of walk this thing out? So that's the essence of this channel. So you'll find some different variations of topics that we cover. And if you have been following the last few videos, we've been in transition.
Yes, we have been.
A big transition.
Yes, we have.
So if you have not seen the previous video, encourage you, pause this one, or maybe after this one, go back to the previous one. So we've done, I think maybe two, at this point. Yeah, we did two.
Yeah.
We did two so far on our transition up here, up north. So if you're not familiar, we were living in the New York City area for a long time. And then we lived in Long Island for a while. And the last year, God has did a whole bunch of things, transition, long story. You got to watch that video, check it out. And now God has moved up here to Western New York. We're here in the Buffalo area, so we've been super excited. So that's pretty much where our transition sort of video has pretty much taken us, and where we kind of left off, if I remember correctly, we were kind of talking about the essence of really getting to the point of how we transitioned here, correct?
Yeah, that's it.
And really our kind of like, I guess I don't want to say the lingering question, but the lingering thought is in a sense of, okay, now that we've transitioned, like, what now? Like, what does that look like? And we started to answer that question in the last video. We didn't really get too deep into it, but we're going to be extending that. So I would say, buckle your seatbelts, right? We're going to be unpacking a few things, but definitely stay to the very end, because we want to talk about some very, very exciting plans that we have in store for our community, right? And we're super excited about it. We're super excited about the journey, and we're super excited about what the next steps are going to be. So stay tuned to the very end so you can hear what those plans are going to be, and we would hope that you would join us in those plans. Absolutely. Anything you want to share before I continue?
There's a lot I have to say, but I don't want to take us off course. If you've watched our videos for a while, and after you get to know me a little bit, I have a tendency to kind of go on my little rants. Comes from a very loving place. I think that one of the questions we get a lot, and I don't know if this will help to segue you somewhat, is why Buffalo? You know, so we get that, like, wait, you were living in New York City, and you lived in Long Island, and you had a home, and you had a good paying job, and you had a space, like, you were in leadership in a great church. Like, why Buffalo? Why now? Like, what was the reason behind that? And so I think that with that question has come, I don't want to say like doubts that kind of like trickle in, but it makes me, I guess at least I'll speak for me, it has made me really say, like, okay, Lord, I know for a fact we heard from you. We prayed for so long. We didn't move until you said yes. We didn't, you know, we didn't go until you until you released us. But this is a very different season than we have been. We've been on like sonic speed in life for the past 20 years. And now I feel like the Lord is kind of like stripping back layers and slowing us down.
And I think that's where we really want to go with this video. We're talking about it. We've been talking about this for a little while, actually. That's where we want to go with the next series of videos. And we have a direction for them, but tonight's really about just kind of introducing what that's going to look like. But we really wanted to, before we get into what those plans are going to be, we really wanted to unpack as to not only the transition to here, right? But what this transition has meant for us. So like Michelle was just mentioning, you know, as we think about where we are, where we came from, right? From a human standpoint, from a logic standpoint, right? for all intents and purposes, it appears like a scale back.
Yeah.
It appears like a demotion.
Yeah.
It appears as though like we're making less, we're appearing less, like there's less status, right? Like there's a reduction in power, there's a reduction in position, right? Like all of those things have occurred.
Yeah.
On paper, logically, right, from a human standpoint, it doesn't seem to make sense, right? But I think that's been the beauty and also the wrestling with the transition, because it's a leap of faith, because we're trusting that we 100% heard from God, and we've been seeing God's hand move in, I want to say in powerful ways, but also very subtle ways.
In a very different way.
I think that's the way to say it. And I think really where we want to kind of start off first is just kind of answering the question as to like, what have we been gaining so far, and sort of capturing from this, just the first few months of this transition. And actually a lot of it has even been a lot of stirring even from before coming up here. So I guess let's start there, and kind of unpack that. So we'll toggle back and forth, have some conversation, but definitely want to engage with you guys so that you guys can kind of hear our hearts, right? But also listen as we're talking. Feel free to drop comments in the comment box to kind of share your thoughts as to what maybe God is kind of speaking to you as you're listening to this. So what are your thoughts on what have you been sort of capturing from this time for yourself?
It's so interesting. As you were saying that, I thought about this conversation that we ended up having. We had this conversation almost 3 years ago. This was before like pastoral ministry. This was before this was around the time, you'll remember this, but around this time, this was early 2021. I remember that you were about to finish your dissertation. You were about to finish your PhD studies, and we were having a conversation, and I remember saying to you, I feel like we have been comfortable for a long time. And I don't know if you remember that conversation, but I feel like we've been comfortable for a very long time. And I do believe that God is going to start requiring more of us in different ways. Like he's going to start to, like, to whom much is given, much is required. Like, you've been given much, now what are you going to do with it? And I really did believe that. Fast forward to about a few months after that, after you finished your PhD studies, you went back to your studies in ministry. And you were like, okay, Lord, you gave me the opportunity to finish my PhD studies, but this I had paused what you had asked me to do, and I'm back in studying, so what is my next step? So if you remember when we were in that space, maybe a few months later, the Lord said yes for us to be interim pastors in one of the campuses. And that was a huge leap of faith for us, not because we didn't believe you had a calling. I do believe that, but you've known that I felt that 20 years ago, but I feel like there was a sacrifice that God was asking us to give up. A certain comfort, a certain, you're getting, you have communion, you have community, you have, the children are getting older, like, you have more time where you're no longer at school, so now you can't give that excuse, like, the Lord basically, I felt like, confronted you face to face and said, I've allowed you, I've permitted you to do these things that you wanted, now it's my turn. So we went into pastoralship from a very, I want to say, green space. Like, it was our very first time within that leadership, learning how to navigate not just like that level of responsibility, but also being in a how it functions within a church. Like, I'm assuming all churches function differently, but our particular church, which we have been a part of for now 12 years, it's different when you're behind the scenes. So learning like, now you're in a different capacity. You're not just a leader of a ministry. You're not just a volunteer. Like, you are now on staff, and what that looks like, what that feels like, all that stuff. Anyway, I really feel like God had been stirring our hearts for, I'm going to change up your life. And this came 2021. You know, and I remember having that conversation. But while we were campus pastoring, you know, or I don't even know how to say that, because you were the campus pastor, I was your wife, I was your admin. But the point is that we were still able to serve from a very comfortable place. Meaning, you still had your job, I still had my job, we still had our home, we still, like, we were able to say, like, oh yes, Lord, we said yes. We said yes, Lord, we're 100% in. But then there were certain things that the Lord started to do while there, like, okay, Lord, all these things are good, but why am I wrestling with certain feelings about what we're doing? So, like, you know how there's that verse, and I think it's in Corinthians, that it's like, everything is available to you, but not everything is beneficial, you know. And so even within the context of ministry, that holds so true. Like,
for sure,
not everything is beneficial. So listen, I could go and I could throw out this whole big bash, I could do a 3-day conference, I could do all this stuff, and that's amazing. But if God has not asked you to do that, then you're in disobedience. So it looks good from a certain point. You might get the acknowledgement from the people you want. You might have all these things, but that's not what God has asked you to do. And so the wrestling within, at least I'll speak for myself, and then, you know, you can add to it. The wrestling that came to me is, I'm doing all these things, and all these things are good, and all these things are taking my time, and they're taking my energy, and they're making me sacrifice certain things. But is this what God is asking me to do? Am I within my gifting? And not only just in my gifting, because the Lord allows us to have many capabilities, abilities, and gifts, but am I in obedience to what God is asking me to do? And that's where a lot of and I don't want to make it seem, because I don't want that if anybody's watching this video, they could say, like, oh, then Michelle was discontent. It wasn't that. I think it was a holy discontent in certain areas where I felt like no joy in what I was doing. Not in everything, but there was like there was something that was stealing my joy. And what I realized was I was filling my space with a lot of what was required of me. But my wrestling came from, God, is this what you're calling me to do? And it was spiritual warfare for a long time. It was in finding God in the smallest of things, and also almost like a dying to self of what I thought it should look like, what I thought it should be like, what people thought of me. A lot of people that are around you when you're in that kind of leadership are not really for you. Kind of like the learning that, seeing that, seeing some hypocrisy from the people that you least expected. Not having support from the people that you thought you would have it, but then having support from people and prayers from people. So it's almost like to see God operate no matter what the opposition was. So it was like such a learning experience, such a blessed time, but also such a trying time, because God the whole time is trying to say, like, I will be glorified, you know, and where you fall short, like, you know, in your weakness, I will be made strong. Like, it's like seeing the gospel in action. But there is like, your flesh is hurting. Your mind is going a little crazy. You are feeling all the feels. It's like this emotional roller coaster. And I'm just like, Lord, is this what ministry is supposed to feel like? Or am I thinking, well, I'm sacrificing for the Lord, you know, like, so this this is suffering for Christ. But was it suffering for Christ, or was it me allowing myself to be put in a place and not speaking when I should have, or sharing what I thought? And so it was a big wrestling. And I'm not just talking about the context of church serving, just like the seasons in general of like what we were going through with our children, with family, in church, out of church. It was just a big wrestling match for, I want to say, the past 3 years. And so when the Lord started to stir our hearts and then require more, meaning like, no, now you're, what I've learned the most was God is faithful. God is faithful. God is faithful. He shows up when you're hurting the most to remind us what is important. And it's like what Moses said, like, Lord, if your presence is not coming, then I don't want to go. Like, I had that in my mind, almost like I could lose everything else, but just not God's presence. And because of that, I was like, if what you want us to do, whatever you want us to do, Lord, but as long as we are in your will, like, that is what's most important to me. So for me, in the midst of all the back and forth, the ups and downs, all the craziness, I just knew I could not live my life without God. I did not want to live my life without God. And more than that, that I wanted to be in obedience to what He was asking us to do, not what others thought, not the suggestions of others, not the, well, you're so gifted in this, well, why don't you do this? Because there's a lot of whispers of what you should do, how you could do it, how you could do it better, how you could work alongside and partner with. It's like the opinions are endless, but what is God saying? And so quieting the voices in order to hear God has been the biggest, like you had mentioned this morning, the biggest blessing, but the biggest challenge also. When
I think about this transition in this season, I think for me it's a couple of things, because first of all, I 100% believe that God closes and opens doors, right? And I think that there's times where He allows things that we walk through that we're like, what? Why did I do this? But He permits it for a reason, right? So when I think about that, when I think about the fact that God is sovereign, He's in control, when I think about that, right, I would say that the two biggest things for me over the last few years have been, one, I think about Ecclesiastes. When I think about them, this rich man talks about the fact that he went and he was like, I'm going to try all these things out. And he had the wealth to do it. So he tried all these things out. Everything, nothing was withheld from him. He tried everything he wanted. He did whatever he wanted. But when he gets to the end of that road of doing all those things, he comes to the conclusion that, man, this is all nothing. Like, it was useless. It was a waste. Like, I tried this. It was nothing. It wasn't fulfilling. I tried this. It wasn't fulfilling.
They all landed
in the same place. So he did this sort of social experiment, and he landed with the same conclusion every single time. The reason I think that's such a powerful analogy, and when we look at what he wrote about, and what the author wrote about, is when I think about my life, right, and our life in this season, I feel like the last few years, for many years, actually, I think for many years, I was on this trajectory of, I serve God, I live for God, but in reality, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to check this box off. And I felt like for years, I've been checking boxes off. And God has been my sidekick. God has been my sidekick, helping me out, right? And God has been, in my mind, the way I've acted towards God, God has been more of my Robin, right?
So you're Batman.
So my Batman, right? Like, God, you're going to help me out. Like, when I can't do this, God, you're gonna come through, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna come through, God. Yeah. So I think I've treated God like Robin for a long time. And God is like, okay, God, I come to you in the clutch. You're gonna see me through this. So for years, I think I've been checking boxes off. I get this degree, I get this job, I get the next job. I do this, we get the house, we get the white fence for the house, we get the car, we get the second car, we get to this, we'll make more money, and then make more money, and now we get this bank, and we do this. So we're checking off these boxes, right, of what civilization, the Western civilization, says is success.
Yeah. But it looks good.
And it looks good. But similar to that, to the rich ruler, you come to all those ends of those roads and you realize, like, man, this was a waste. It didn't fulfill. So I think what I've realized over the last year, I want to say about a year and a half, is that what God has been revealing to me is all of the idols that have really been inside of me, of idol of success, idol of needing validation, of needing approval, right? Needing to be liked, right? Needing to reach certain benchmarks. These were idols that I was chasing after, and Robin needs to help me out to achieve them. So, and I feel like what God has been revealing over all this time has been, you have these idols. These idols need to die. But then the second part of that is, because once those idols start to die, they say, well, what do I do now? Well, I think that's the hard part. I say, well, what do I do now?
Who am I? Who am I
without the title?
When
I set aside my PhD, who am I?
When it doesn't look so good.
When I don't have a title in church, who am I?
Yeah.
So when I'm stripping away, and I think that's what God here's what's happened in the last year. What I think what's happened in the last year is that God has made me okay with the concept of, and has really deposited me that holy rest, and then added the idea of living without those things is a good thing, right? And being okay without those things is a good thing.
And also, leading without, because I want to say, at least for us, keep in mind what you were going to say, because I also think for us, one thing that is important to say is, when we started the leadership, pastoral leadership, in a very, I want to say, very difficult soil, right? And we are two people that, one, want to do things with excellence. Two, are like, we are achieve markers. Like, we have strategy, we have a plan. We put a plan in place. We're consistent. We're on time. We're all this stuff, and for all intents and purposes, we are very relational. Also, I want to say, we relate to people differently, but we're very relational in nature, and I feel like even that was something that there was opposition against us. So we led from a very unpopular place, I want to say. Like, we had people that really, really loved us, and people that are just like, who are these two? So I think that if, now that I'm looking back at the ministry of Jesus wasn't popular with everybody. Like, there were people that would go out to see Jesus, literally, and wanting to see his fall and his demise. So I think that even in how we were serving, now that we have had a little bit of time, kind of like, to look back at it, it makes me appreciative, because I know that God was dealing more with our character. And like you said, those idols of, like, people pleasing, of always having to be there for people, how you show up for people. Like, there was a lot of things that I feel like God was targeting, like, teaching us in the midst of all of that.
And I think what God, over years period, probably more, was depositing, was having less, being unpopular.
Having less is more.
Having less is more.
Being unpopular is not a bad thing.
Is not a bad thing. But I think where it's landed me is, and I think that's where we're at now, is this burning desire to live like with the heart of Mary, to live in a position of I want to abide in Christ.
Yes.
I think that's where I've landed. Now, disclaimer, I have not mastered this.
No, not at all. I'm not saying that to shoot you down. We have not mastered that.
And the reason I bring this up is because so even I've been doing some videos, actually just put one out on slow living. None of this is being mastered. We're currently exploring this. We're living this. However,
when they do those real those videos, this is in real time.
This is in real time.
This is in real time. Yeah.
So we're going through this. However, I have a very strong conviction about the fact that when I look at and it's funny, there's this author which we're going to talk about in a little bit. He said this. He says, and I'll tell you who the author is in a minute. He says there's a difference between disciples and Christians. And he's like, disciples, they're apprentices of Jesus. These people are following the way of Jesus, right? And I've gotten to a place where I'm convicted on the fact of I want to live with less. It doesn't mean God won't give us more, but that when more comes, that won't be the source of anything. It would just be a resource. It would just be another object, but it won't fill.
Yeah.
The source of filling is going to come from Christ.
Yeah.
And I think what the last year has done is God has been preparing us to do with this concept of stripping away. Because for a long time, I'm even before all this, I was I want to live more minimalist. I want to live slower. And I think also it was from a place of, and I know that was only God, because I think it started there from a position of, oh my goodness, this house is always a mess. This house is always a mess. We got stuff everywhere. There's too much stuff. So I was I want to live like a minimalist because I want to.
But just to speak, the house was clean.
Yes, but meaning it felt like there was
cluttered. It felt like there was stuff. Yeah.
It felt like every room had extra stuff that we weren't using.
Yes.
And we felt like we were always buying something to fill, and it was blowing through cash just to get another thing, or Amazon doing this,
buying a bookshelf to carry the books, buying baskets to put away stuff.
So I believe that God deposited the minimalist idea way before as a way to kind of sow that seed. Yeah. But what He's transformed that into over time is you've got your eyes are not set on me.
No.
In the book of Hebrews, he's fix your thoughts on Christ, and then there's another portion of scripture, fix your eyes on Christ. So it's fix your thoughts on Christ. So when we're saying we're setting our eyes on, we're setting our thoughts on Him. I think that's very different than what our Western Christian culture says. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that how Christianity looks like in our society is not what Christ intended it to be. I'm convinced of that. And when I look at the way of the Master, He was so countercultural. We in our society are trying to, in our Christian world, I feel like we're trying to almost take because it says, do not be conformed by the pattern of this world. We as a church community are taking the patterns of the world and Christianizing it.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. We're taking what works in the world, and we're making it Christian.
Yeah, we
we pop a verse on it, we put some worship music to it, but we follow the marketing patterns, right? We follow the systems of the world. Like, this is how you get customers. So, okay, this is how I get customers. This is how I can get people into my doors. So, where this has landed us, and this is kind of the segue to where we want to get to, this whole conversation has led us into not only just a journey to here, because with a journey to here, there's been a lot of just like exploring different things. Like, okay, for example, I'll give you social media as an example. Okay, not watching as much social media. But yeah, you're like, what do I do with that time, right? Like, okay, so, or not, whatever. But so it's like, you feel like it's like a dying to self, because
it's a dying to self.
Like, I'll give you a little activity. If you ever sit and just try to sit quiet for just a full 2 minutes, your mind is everywhere. So imagine hours of just like not filling the space with something to do.
Yeah.
That's boring to the flesh. But what you realize is, man, we don't give space to God. Like, so I think that's where the wrestling is. So anyway, where this is going is, Michelle and I got this book, and
it just kept coming up.
It just kept coming
up. The book is over there, but it's so interesting. While you were talking, I'm going to share it because it literally came to my mind. We are children of immigrant parents. And
we got to tell them what authors of the book is.
We will. But we are children of immigrant parents. And I'll speak for myself. When I was growing up here in American society, my mom and my father, like, they wanted to instill a lot of the Dominican culture that we were apart from, because now we were in America, and in America, people did different things, and some kids were disrespectful or whatever. And so my mom would sit me down and remind me of the sacrifice that she made to come to this country. And she wanted to remind me of the culture that was so near and dear to her that she didn't want us to lose. So we spoke Spanish in the home. We ate traditional meals. She talked to us about what her childhood was, why it was so important that we kept our mind on studying, being successful, and doing all these things. She's like, Michelle, I want you to go to college because I didn't get to go to college. Hey, Michelle, I want you to be responsible because there was a lot of things that I lost opportunities with because I wasted my time. So my mom wanted to remind me so much, and my dad too. I think my mom more than my dad, because my dad was raised here. My dad came when he was really young. My dad was like 6, 7, around there. But my mom was a little older, so she had lived life knowing the sacrifice that she made to come to this country. And her reminder to me was, know that your mom did so much so that you could, to pave the way so you could do more. So why was this why am I saying this? Why is God reminding me of that? God did such a great sacrifice to pave a way for us to live a certain kind of way. Like, we are afforded the opportunity to live in the land of the free and the brave, not to be like other people that are just wasting their time. Like, God is saying, you live in a country where you have freedom of speech. What are you going to do with that speech? You have an opportunity to make money. What are you going to do with that money? Are you going to hoard it for you, or are you going to use it for my good? You have an opportunity to live out this culture that I'm giving you, to live out the gospel, or you have an opportunity to conform to what everybody else is doing. So I think that one of the things that God has been reminding me constantly is, what has been my sacrifice and what does it mean to you? Like, what are you doing with the space and the time that you have? Are you going to just live like everybody else, or are you going to live with the culture that I am instilling in you, with the reminder of the sacrifice that I made for you to live out. And I think that for me has been the biggest conviction. And I'm so thankful. Thank you, Holy Spirit, because when you were speaking, I don't know why the Holy Spirit was reminding me of that, like of what my mom used to do. And I think it's because I even mentioned this earlier about like my dad. I love my dad, but he has this like vision of what he wants life to be, and like he has this thought in mind. And I'm like, but isn't that so much like our Heavenly Father? Like, He has a thought in mind of what He has for us. He has in mind what we're supposed to be. He has in mind how we're supposed to live. But do we give space to God to speak to that? Or are we just like bratty children, like, I'm just going to do me. I know what I'm supposed to do. I know what I want to do. But then when we're left empty, which, by the way, shameless plug, we did make a video about when we reach goals and what happens, where we talk about that. Like, when we reach these goals and we're left empty, it's because we're doing them with the wrong motives. And so I think that when this book came up, so I'll go back to that. And sorry for the parentheses. Like I said, I go on little rants, but I think that was important to state, because God is requiring that, not just of us, but of all His children and all those who He's calling, like, to be countercultural. And I know that sometimes it is difficult, because we're living in a country right now where entertainment is everywhere. Well, not even in a country, in a world where entertainment is everywhere. Information is accessible. I don't even have to open my phone. I'm like, hey Siri, what time is it? And I get constant feedback all the time. But we were sitting down. John went for his licensing, and the guy that was there, the pastor, he literally said, and he's so funny. It's so funny that he said that, because he said, I am not trying to be prophetic, but he was. And he had no clue. He said, I don't know. He's like, I'm not trying to say that I'm a prophet and I'm being prophetic right now, but I really feel like God is going to transition you guys soon. And one of the books that I will recommend to you is The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which is the book that we're going to talk to you about. And it just seemed to come out of nowhere for him to say that to us. And he said, don't try to do everything in a day. Take it in bite-sized pieces. But I really do feel that God is going to challenge you too, and He's going to transition you soon. And that was in, when was it that wasn't that in May? Yeah. That was in May. You know, when we spoke to him. So, no, that was not in May. That was in September. It was in September.
Oh, we had already been.
It was the first day of school. It was like September 6th, 7th, around there. It was in September, so we had already had a plan to move up here, and he had no idea. And when he said that to us, I was like, wow. And then somebody mentioned something about like being in like doing so many things for the Lord, and I was sharing with this person how I've been feeling, and I'm like, wow, somebody recommended me this book, and they said, oh, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
And it's by John Mark Comer.
Yes. And so I wrote down the name of the book, and
we'll put it in the description.
And we'll put it in the description, and totally forgot about the book. And the pastor's wife, of the transitioning pastor, the pastor that took over the position that we left, we're having a conversation. We're talking about the certain admin stuff. And I'm talking to her about my heart, because she's like, well, what's next for you and John? And I'm like, well, we are working through Sabbath. Like, what does that mean? How do we Sabbath? And I said, there is a book that I'm looking into. I do not remember where I wrote down the title and what it's about. And she's like, well, what is the book about? And I'm like, the book teaches you how to Sabbath. And she's like, you must be talking about The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I was like, thank you. So 3 times the book was recommended to us. And so,
So that's the book that we are we literally just started.
Yes.
Like a few days ago.
Yes.
And the reason we're bringing it up is because, well, first of all, we want to talk about 2 things. It's why it matters, to us in this season and what the plan is.
Yeah.
The reason it matters to us right now is because of the fact of all what we just said. So just scroll back and watch the whole video again. But seriously, the reason it matters is because when you come from and I don't know how many of you can relate to this, but when you come from a mindset and a lifestyle like we did of high volume, high speed, low drag lifestyle and it's funny because when we're talking to that guy, I'm like rattling off all these things that we're doing, and
we're proud of all this stuff.
We're a proud moment.
We're
spitting off your resume.
All these things,
And I think we definitely do that. Listen, let's be honest. I think everybody does that. We're like, we always try to one up. Well, what are you doing? Oh, I had an event. I had 3,000 people. Wow, we just had an event. It was 7,000 people. I think everybody, but we do that in churches too. Why? Because we have metrics of success in our society.
Yeah. And
which
also,
is honestly,
you validate yourself. You
exactly.
feel good.
Look how amazing I am.
I'm successful.
It's like a humble brag, right?
It ain't no humbleness about that.
So the reason it matters is because as we're talking about all this stuff, right? What's come to mind is, and it's funny because the other book that I got from him, which I haven't started reading, but I've been watching some videos from John Mark Comer, is Practicing the Way, right?
Yep.
Practicing the Way. And just been watching a couple of videos, very powerful if you haven't seen it. But the essence of both of these books is it goes so well with what we've been trying to understand.
Yeah.
And it's getting a place to understand of okay, if I strip all this away, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Why should this matter? Why should I care about eliminating hurry?
Mm-hmm.
Why should I care about not rushing? Why should I care about, if I'm reading through a book, why should I take my time with it? Why should I be intentional about conversations? Why should I slow down? Why does that matter?
Why is that important?
Why is that important? Mm-hmm. So I think for us, we're in a season of trying to understand that. We, in our heart, we have a conviction about we need to do this.
Yeah.
Second is we feel like God is saying that we're going to live countercultural, right? That's the objective. That's the aim. We want to be the Martha. We want to be the Mary, not the Martha, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to. Okay, if the kitchen is a mess, but the master's in our presence, we want to be with the master.
Yeah.
Not let me check off these metrics to be like, hey Papa, look what I did for you. Mm-hmm. We can't make there's nothing we could do that would just blow God out of the water. No, but are we abiding in Him? Are we grafted tightly to Him? Are we absorbing Him? Are we giving space to Him? Mm-hmm. But all that is so counter our own flesh. Slowing down, taking time, not having a time clock, not having to make sure we get through this thing to then get to the next thing. That is so counter our flesh. Mm-hmm. So the reason the book for us is very critical is because there's things that we don't know how to do. Mm-hmm. So the plan, right, is that we are going to be reading the book.
Yes.
We're going to be journaling through the book.
Yes.
And we will be making videos.
Yes.
In response to what we're reading.
Yes.
So we just started. So this is pretty much just like a segue. So we're not really prepared to make the first video on it yet. Mm-hmm. However, stay tuned because we're going to be rolling out videos based off of the book.
Yes.
I would actually pray that you would consider praying about joining us in this journey.
Yeah.
And here's why. Because when I look at Jesus, I don't think that this is what we're exploring and what the book talks about. I don't think it's just some like hippy dippy sort of thing. I believe that Jesus 100% is advocating this sort of lifestyle, where we live with a mentality of less is more, where we live with a mentality of I want to do one thing really well. When we live with a mentality of I'm just working on this task and I'm going to work on it, be present, be mindful, right? Have conversations where are very intentional, very present.
Very demure.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
Sorry, had to.
And not having to get to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, so I think that's my opinion on it, but I would encourage you to join us in this journey.
Absolutely.
And listen, that's going to be the goal. So I don't know how many videos we're going to do of it. The chapters are broken down in a kind of a weird way. They're parts, but they're like several parts in each.
There's like
several sections in each
3 or 4
part.
chapters within a chapter.
Yeah. So we'll see how we sort of break that up, but stay tuned for the first video. And I would say, listen, pray on what we talked about tonight.
Yeah.
Pray on what we talked about tonight. Not sure if any of this resonated with you. And I would say be on the lookout for the next one. I'm not going to promise when it will come out, but stay tuned for it. The goal is hopefully we get to roll it out each week. The reason I don't want to promise that is because I think if we set that as a benchmark, I think we'll rush just to get it out.
Yeah.
And I don't want. I think I can speak for both of us in this one. We don't want to do that.
No.
Because the point is not to rush. The point is to actually absorb it.
Yeah.
Live it out. Practice it. Do something with it.
Think about it. Meditate on it. And look
and wrestle with it.
Yeah, and wrestle with it. So I do want to say the book we read just part 1.
So far, very convicting.
It's convicting in the best way.
Yeah.
Because
shout out to John Mark Comer for this book.
Literally, I just really feel like if you are living out your Christian walk and you are at the point where we are, like, first of all, the book for us, we got it mainly to find out how to Sabbath. We have been believers for 20 years. And we had we're like, okay, the Lord is taking us through a sabbatical. And we are 2 people that have no idea how to rest. So the book was more than anything a way for us to take our hands, sit on our hands so that we don't do anything, and actually say, Lord, how do we actually Sabbath?
Yeah.
What the introduction to the book has led us to, like, the book will eventually get to how we Sabbath. Yeah. But what it has explained so far is the importance of why hurry has become this thing.
But that's a little teaser.
That's just a little teaser because honestly the book has been phenomenal, just part 1. So I think that this is not information that should just be for the both of us.
Yeah. No.
And guys, I am sitting down here making this video and making videos with my husband out of pure obedience, because if you know me personally, I am not a person that likes to take pictures. I don't like to be on videos. I don't like to be on any of these platforms in that way. But I really just feel like God is asking of me to get outside of my comfort zone and to trust Him in this thing. And I know that we are not the only 2 people that are saying this cannot be what God is asking us to do. Because if God is asking us, literally there is a verse that says, let your light shine for all to see, so that I'm losing the verse. Let your light shine for all to see, so that they may glorify your Father in heaven. Meaning, like, you are not to hide that you are a believer. You are not to hide what God has deposited on you. You are not to put it, nor are you supposed to put it on display for your glory. And so when you start to rely so much on, it felt good to do this, it felt good to do that, because it does feel good to get applauded for what you do well, whether it's in a secular world or in church. But you have to, like, there is something that God is asking of us to do. And I think I would say this.
I can almost guarantee that most people that watch this video can say that at some point in their life, because I know every one of us has had this, that we come to certain points in our life where it's like, where you pause, you reflect on your life, and you're like, man, this can't be it. Even from the richest to the poorest people, everybody and everyone in between has that thought. I think about, you hear about rich people all the time who are like, I've got all this money and I'm still empty. You know, but I think it doesn't matter the social class. Like, you have rich people who have that mind, who have that thought, but then you also have rich people who their wealth doesn't consume them. They live peaceful, right? They live with sort of like that mindset, and they're happy. They're content, right? They found true contentment. And then you have poor people who have the same worlds. Like, they strive, and it's like, man, this can't be life. And you have the poor person who's like, yeah, I'm content. So it doesn't matter how much money you have in your pocket,
or lack of it.
It doesn't. None of that actually matters. But I think most people can agree that we've all paused at some point. Is like, this can't be life. This can't be Christianity. You know, getting to the next event can't be Christianity. Filling the seats in the church cannot be Christianity. That's like, just pumping out, you know, new people can't be Christianity. Like, Jesus walked with his disciples for years, and he taught them very intentionally. He walked with them, he corrected them, he guided them. He taught, you know, like, he spent time. So I think that there has to be more. And I think that's really the journey that we're trying to go on. And I'm excited for it. Again, it is wrestling, because even the first few days of just like thinking about this, try to disconnect a little bit from the phone. It's like, all right, and then back on the phone, like, oh wait, okay. So it's like, and it's not about, oh my goodness, I'm just gonna get social media. I think it's deeper than that. I think it's deeper than just the exercise of eliminating social media or not watching TV. I think it's deeper than that. It's what do I do with my idle time? Where does my mind go? You know, does it go to God? Do I think on God? Do I think about Him? Is my space filled with Him? Right? And I think getting into the developing habits where, like, now my norm is Christ is my center. He is first. He is King. And He is everything, right? Like, He takes up most of the space of my life, right?
And being content with
that.
Because if
nothing happening,
think about that. We are taught you can be whatever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to put your mind to. And now the agenda is, well, you can identify however you want to identify. You want to be however you want. And literally, we are literally saying, if there's ever a moment where I have sat on God's throne, where I have taken His place, where I have taken up space for whatever, even if it's for my own gain or in the realm of, well, I'm helping or I'm doing whatever, but the reality is I'm doing it with some sort of selfish motive or being conceited or whatever. That God is basically saying, I'm stripping you off of all of those things so that all you see is me. And when you see just me, are you satisfied with that?
Yeah, and I think, yes, that's probably the best line right there. Like, am I satisfied? Like, if you were to strip everything away, house, car, money, this, that, like, if we strip it all away, honestly, would we be just content to be at the Master's feet? And I think that most people, if they honestly answered that question, would probably be like, well, but just me in the Bible, nothing else. Just me in prayer, my needs, nothing else. What else is there? You know, I think most people would wrestle with that. You know, after a while, the candles will die out. Like, you know, the music will be boring after a while. Like, so I think that's what we're striving for, is finding true contentment in those things. So, listen, don't know how long this video is.
So that's the journey. That's the journey.
That's the journey.
Yeah.
We are super excited to go on this, and as we go through, we'll share our wrestlings. We'll share our honest opinions on what we're wrestling with, what we're struggling with,
what we were convicted,
on. So, you know, you'll be able to kind of get into our head a little bit. And then the other part that I'm going to give you a heads up on, right, that in a few months, you know, we also will be moving
somewhere else
to our permanent home, because we're in a rental. So in a few months, setup will probably look a little different again, which is fine.
So this is a journey, guys.
This is a journey. But definitely asking for your prayers, right, as we are in this transition. And all right, listen, until the next one. Thank you for staying to the very end. Like, share, and subscribe this video, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys. Bye.